East Austin, East Travis County topography, and West Austin where they have more limestone. East Austin has more erodible soils. So if we see growth going east, we want to get ahead of it like we have before and start protecting creeks by having greater setbacks. We're talking about moving the setbacks for headwaters up to 64 acres. And would like to know if you'd be supportive of that. And the problem with that is we're making good progress, but the developers are wanting to take the creek setbacks and use it as their parkland dedication, which they're required to do. Saying, well, this land that we can't use, but we're going to share with the city of Boston. To me, that's a lot like saying we're going to share your corn. I'll eat corn. I'll give you all the Would you support the 64-acre setback, and would you allow the developers to use that as parkland dedication? And then I want to ask a question about State Highway 45.
Sure, Sheryl, you want to start?
Sure. The 64 acres, are you talking about along the Colorado or?
No, along Gilliland Creek, all the east
all the
creek.
East Street?
Over there, along 130.
Is the area of a creek that drains a 64-acre area.
Right, it
So
drains.
if the creek drains that big an area, you need to have setbacks along that creek.
Well, just without, I know I need to know more before I land defensively, but I don't understand how anybody could use public land, let alone parkland, as part of the existing parkland dedication.
Well, it's not. They're buying this land for development and saying 64 acres. If it's 64 acres in the drainage, then the setback that we're going to protect the creek banks that we're not developing, we're giving to the city as park. But it can't really be used as park because it's in the floodplain. And it's unlike several areas in East Austin.
So that's the problem with our parkland ordinance, isn't it? We need to just amend the ordinance.
No, that's a problem. I don't know.
Well, I would say I don't support. You want land dedicated for parkland to be able to be used for parks.
Right.
That, yeah.
Good. And you're right. Okay. Actually, since he kept talking, you had
no, it is a two-part question. I do want to basically answer. It's close to it.
So first, I absolutely believe that 64-acre drain runoff, or what was the word you used?
It's for headwater.
It needs to be preserved. Water is the rarest commodity and most precious resource that we have as a society or a civilization. And the idea that we would take, especially in Texas during a drought, and take areas that would help our waterways, to flow naturally and to maintain their quality. The fact that it's even under consideration that someone's going to build development on it, I find to be offensive. I think that definitely would. I would never approve of that. There are houses that can be built in certain areas, but when you put it onto when you put it into an area that is so sensitive like that, it has to be preserved. It doesn't matter what kind of incentives that the developers are offering, that needs to be taken care of and preserved.
Okay, to move south and west on State Highway 45, the proposal to extend it to 1626. Would you vote to block that, given that the right-of-way currently runs over just the right-of-way? There are over 300 recharge features to the aquifer, to the Edwards Barton Springs aquifer. It takes 3 days for it to get to Barton Springs. And that also incentivizes sprawl. Both of these are mentioned in the Austin, Imagine Austin plan. Keep wanting to call it Austin tomorrow, Mary. But that was Austin yesterday.
30 years yesterday.
Yeah, a long time ago yesterday. But that is, and either through tech stop money or county and city money.
I would absolutely not allow that. Like I said about the 64 acres, you cannot handle or develop or mess with these recharge zones. One thing that Austin has and no other city has is the quality of its water. Like I said earlier, I went to New York University and I was on the rowing team, and we actually had to go practice in the East River and shipping lane near the Frog's Neck Bridge. And one of our crewmates actually lost his footing and fell in the water, and he got out like 4 seconds later. And after that, he actually had to have a week or two long battery of antibiotics because he caught them in the 4 seconds he was underwater. And I also lived in Chicago for my first year of school before I transferred to NYU, and I've seen the Bubbly Creek. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. The Chicago Stockyard, there's so much pollution in there from the mid-1800s that bubbles still rise from the processed animal mess that was thrown in there. Chicago River, which Chicago Sanitation Canal. I know what it's like to live in places with water that cannot be even touched, nonetheless drink or enjoy. And when we talk about the quality and the life of Barton Springs and the Colorado River and just the ability to live like literally live with in Austin with our cleanliness and supply of our drinking water, the fact that a road would take precedent over just living, I think I would never allow. If 45 ever came, or 45 Southwest, I believe it's what it's called, I would never vote for that. And if anything that I had the power to do to kill it, I would. There's no way that we can have development sprawl onto this area, especially when Austin obviously needs to become more dense. You were a city manager in 1984. I can't imagine the Lord of the Rings volumes that you would write over what's happened in the city in the past 30 years. But yes, our resources need to be preserved, and our ability to live in a clean environment trumps development.
Yeah, real quick, because we're up against the time limit. Go ahead,
I can say a little later if you want.
We have another group coming in.
Oh, that's right, the mayor.
The mayor.
We made a decision to not develop in the environmentally sensitive areas and to move that development east. We've had that discussion. I think it's pretty much done. I do think there's a problem because there are people that wasn't a part of that decision or didn't hear the community outcry on that, and they want a road. But finding options for transportation for them, that can't be off the table. We can't ignore that area or just draw a line at the river or anything like that. So we have to listen to them and consider other options. But I'm not in favor of encouraging sprawl, and I'd like to see us come to a solution.
So,
Roy,
yes or no?
You had 2 questions.
45. Would you support it? Would you oppose it?
I would oppose it.
Okay.
But I have voted for it to be in the Campo plan, but unfunded, because I support the discussion.
Okay. We're going to move on real quick to the neighborhood question.
Yeah, Burnout Road is a transit corridor in the Imagine Austin plan, and with the approval of a lot of 5-story apartment complexes in the last year, it appears that the desired density has sort of already begun. Staff has indicated that Imagine Austin is consistent with adopted neighborhood plans, but if elected or re-elected, would you oppose approving Imagine Austin if contact teams for neighborhood plans disagree and say that the plan does not align with what they have set up?
Sheryl or Shaun?
Okay. I was chair of the Comprehensive Planning and Transportation Committee and followed Imagine Austin very, very carefully. My basic answer is the Imagine Austin plan and the neighborhood plan are not supposed to be inconsistent, and they're supposed to be interpreted as consistent as possible to preserve the plan. I appreciate that a ton of work goes into those conferences, and so I've been told over and over again that it will be rare that it will be a situation where the neighborhood plan conflicts with the Imagine Austin. So I'm just, in in my mind, it shouldn't come up to even be a problem.
Shaun?
I would go in, I would need to see this on a case-by-case basis, and if there was some sort of a development that was proposed or some sort of a plan for a specific neighborhood, I would go into that neighborhood and ask them what exactly their thoughts or their opinions on, not only for their specifics, but also in, any neighboring developments that might be also affecting them. Austin needs to become denser. Not everyone can live in a 3-bedroom home. There's just no space for that, especially if, to grow, to expand, we need to, develop recharge zones. One thing, problem that's wrong with Austin growing more denser is that there's no infrastructure improvements, especially on roads or bike lanes or the bus system, or maybe even a proposed elevated light rail system, which would be more, which would allow the city to grow denser around it. But there's no money for it. The city's allocated a lot of expenditures on a lot of other unnecessary projects to benefit, tourist attractions, and has neglected the local infrastructure. I know that, on Lamar, I live in 78704, by the way, hello neighbor. I know that we have like 4 new big apartment complexes, but the roads aren't being taken care of. We're turning Barton Springs into basically like a Zilker, like Central Park West for Zilker almost. And there's no, so basically the roads stay the same, but more people come, and there's like 1,000 extra cars on the road because of these developments. You have to have transportation. It can't just all be about buildings. It has to be about how those people are going to live and get around. And that's definitely something that I feel that needs to be more thoroughly addressed. But like I said, it's all about spending, money. I mean, as far as infrastructure goes, Formula One got a $13 million reimbursement for a sewer pipe that they had already built, but there are no storm drains on my street. There's no money to help to fix that 71 290 split off in Oak Hill. There's no money for that, but there's money to reimburse, basically Millionaire Europe's version of NASCAR for something that they already built. We don't need to pay people to come here. People want to come here. We have the charm. And to keep that charm, we need to protect our environmental resources. But another reason we can get people to come here is because it's a great place to live. But you can't spend money attracting people, then when they're here, not take care of them. That is an issue that has gone on for a long time.
Okay, I get ask the last question. It's about government budget or accountability. On the first page of Imagine Austin, the very first sentence says that Austin is a model of livability. Yet, since 1990, our city has grown from the most affordable city in Texas to the least affordable. And on that same front page of Imagine Austin, the bottom of the page, it says that 20% of our kids live in poverty. How can we have the most livable city in Texas, and yet 20% of our kids live in poverty? One of the things about Imagine Austin is that it's begun to deal with the issue of land use planning with transportation planning. And that's a good thing. We all agree with that. But the missing part is that we haven't taken this plan and figured out whether it works economically for the people who live here today. Is it going to provide the affordability? Is it going to address the cost of living? Is it going to make it so that the people that have homes here, that have lived here for a long time, are going to be able to pay their property taxes and not be forced to move to Buda or someplace else? So, as a council person, elected or re-elected, would you support, for adopting the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, an economic analysis to see if this plan that we have in place actually can provide the economic basis for an affordable, livable city for all of us?
I agree with everything you said. My hesitation is I don't know what that economic analysis would do, because the Imagine Austin plan plan is supposed to be a living, breathing document that lasts over a 30-year period that fluctuates. So it would be a, viable in good times, viable in bad times. And, Jeff, I just might be a CPA and it doesn't make sense to me what you're saying. I can understand doing an economic plan for like the 11th, 12th Street corridor. And so I'm guessing you're saying doing that for the entire city?
Well, let me give you an example.
Okay.
We have this great model for adding density. And as Shaun was saying in the last question, we have an infrastructure issue, whether that infrastructure can actually support that density. There's no analysis in the plan with regard to the density, its relationship to the existing capacity of our infrastructure. There is no price tag for what that would cost and who's going to pay for it. So if we are looking at providing infrastructure to accommodate this plan that's in Imagine Austin's density, and it actually results in a significant added cost that has to be paid through the taxes, is that affordable? Or is that model not going to work for us in order to keep us affordable and allow the existing residents to live in the city? So that's just an example. But let me suggest this to you. We have economic minds in the city at UT and professionals in the business could work together to define what that economic modeling would be. But shouldn't we have that information before we actually adopt the land use plan, understanding that it will change? And I think I want to respond to that.
When we first budgeted for the Imagine Austin plan, it was budgeted for $1.2 million. And as far as I know, with all the kind of new information that different groups wanted to come out of that plan, we're close to at least $1.7 million. So I guess my answer to your question is I would think an additional economic analysis on the breadth and depth and scope that you are suggesting, I would not support at this time. But I do support the idea that kind of as we develop our corridors, and as we, kind of look for certain areas, we need to try to grapple with the infrastructure costs. I think that's a valid point. It's just, I'm kind of studying the study, planning the plan, and hiring consultants out.
John?
I think that this city is almost unlivable. I know, I'm 28. I have a lot of, friends who are just getting started in their lives, and they love Austin dearly. They can't afford it because they can't have, go in and to buy a home, pay the note on it, pay insurance, and then pay property taxes, and then have money left over for living, just regular living expenses. And even if they did have that, how good of a quality of life it would be. And people, and if the budget, job changes or whatever, and they're holding the note on a, a $600,000 home that is, in all honesty, probably worth, less than that. There would be constantly losing money or being forced close to foreclosure. But the city people will continue to live in poverty, and as the city continues to spend the tax dollars it gets from those people unwisely. If you cut spending, if you cut the bureaucracy, if you cut the giveaways to, developments such as like the $4.5 million for subsidizing a hotel that was already going to be built, and you look at things like that, that's $4.5 million out of the economy right there, just given away, like literally just given away. And if you look at all the money and all the government largesse, the extraneous expenditures that are not actual city operations. Once we need to find out what exactly the city can be budgeted on, like actual city operating costs, and then you can say, okay, well, this is how much, and this is what the cash would be, and then you say, well, there are some programs that are very popular. Well, can we maybe get some private sponsorship with those through, corporate donations to, that program? We don't have to, you can't just keep spending money every time someone asks for money. And to reiterate, we will continue to lose people who want to live here to outside county communities because they just can't afford to live here, and they can't afford to live here because they're paying taxes to pay for all these things that they don't have anything to do with, and if they keep losing money into these taxes just to pay for economic misadventures, then the city will never be livable. More kids will continue to go into poverty.
We've run out of time, but I would like to give each of you 2 minutes to wrap up and hit something that's important to you in this election that we haven't talked about.
We do not work closely enough with the school system, and that is our future. In many other cities throughout the country, the recognition that our youth, whether we're talking about workforce development, their education, their employment, is key to having the tax base that we need for all the other things that we want to create, such as affordability, parks, public spaces. And we don't talk about that enough. We get lost in our little municipal world and forget that the other taxing entities, we have to work more closely with them, and also more on a regional basis also, to really grapple with a lot of the issues we have.
Shaun?
I think that one of the number one issue is cost of living in the city, because that touches on almost everything, including the viability of small businesses or just the ability to have living costs. Because when you have property values that skyrocket in a place with property taxes that we have, it's almost not looking to sell, they're not looking to flip, they're looking to own and live there for 30 years. I know there's a man there who was lived in a house for like $70,000 in 1980, and now he pays $80,000 and has to find $8,000 a year just to pay the property tax, just to live in a home that he's owned outright for over a decade. But one of the biggest issues that has come up in this election is, or in the past year, is the electricity rate increase. And you look at cost of living, you need to look at the fact that the electricity utility is not just for electricity, it's a stealth tax that is being used to fund the Economic Development Office, which is really interesting because it is funding the Economic Development Office when it's taking money out of the economy by people having to choose between grocery bills or the electric bill. And for the city council to have an entire I can't even count how long this debacle has been going on for. But for the fact that they would postpone the vote on the electric rate increase until a week after the election, I think is the opposite of good government and not what Austin deserves. These are serious issues, and it requires serious people to address them in a meaningful and actionable way. And that is not going to happen if public officials can't make difficult decisions when there's an election coming up. And I would really like to see it won't be my vote anyway, because if I was so lucky to win this race, I wouldn't even be sworn in until July, which is over a month or so after the election. And but one thing I would like to see is that I had an idea for is to go make the utility rate almost see what it does actually at cost, and then add a little bit for a rainy day fund. And if there's any more percentage that you possibly could add for other energy-based initiatives, I would support that. But the fact that our electric utilities are basically just operating as a stealth tax, where they say, well, the sales tax won't go up, but we're going to raise the electric rate. And that you won't have people be able to live here. And if we're going to maintain a beautiful, viable city, then you need to address the spending and you need to address the taxation. Because for every nickel you get out through taxes, that's another nickel that someone's not spending at a small business or investing or paying off their mortgage instead of being off of foreclosure. And I think that those are some issues that we need to look at as this campaign goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're out of time.
Yes,
I appreciate everybody. We're overtime.
We're overtime. 10 minutes.
We